Hello, I'm Edmunds from Tarian Technology in Welshpool.
And I'm Detective Constable Gareth Jordan. I'm based here in Carmarthenshire Police Headquarters within the Cybercrime Department.
Today we're going to talk about disaster recovery plans and how you can prepare for an inevitable cyber attack. 40% of UK companies reported a cyber breach last year. What can a company do to ensure they are covered in the event of a cyber disaster?
Okay, I think it's becoming more prevalent in a company's planning nowadays. Certainly the area of people are becoming more aware that even huge companies do get these cyber attacks. It's one of those areas whereby sometimes people also think it's only going to happen to the big boys. It's only going to happen to your British Airways, to your TalkTalk, to EasyJet, Marriott Hotels, those sorts of people. They've all had these types of problems. But you've got to start bringing it down and thinking, okay, what do we cover for? What are we covered for? What are we ready for? And if we look at our own companies and think about what we already mitigate for, we insure against theft, against fire, against maybe production loss, depends on the type of company. But do we insure against cyber vulnerabilities? Are we insured against cyber attacks? Have we actually brought in an external company or a consultancy to look at where our inadequacies are? For yourselves, in terms of Tarian Tech, you already do those sorts of surveys and you're well versed in doing it. However, I think a lot of companies, if you ask them how cyber ready they are, they may say, we're okay, we've got cyber insurance. But what a lot of people don't realise is that cyber insurance isn't going to cover them, a bit like a lot of insurances don't, if they haven't followed a really strict stipulation about what they do or don't have in terms of technology for their backups. Certainly, one of the disaster recovery thoughts is that there's two types of people. There's people that have lost data and there's people that will lose data. And that is really what it comes down to nowadays. You are going to, at some stage, have a problem with your IT, whether it be from a cyber attack, whether it be through mechanical breakdown, electrical breakdown. What is your disaster recovery plan would be one of the first questions I would ask a company when I go in there. What happens if you walk into your office on a Monday morning and all the screens are down and you do not know how to get that system back up and running again? Have you got a disaster recovery plan? The same way that you have a fire evacuation plan, the same way that you have a lot of other contingency plans. What is your disaster recovery plan when it comes down to cyber? Because with cyber, unless you've got a disaster recovery plan and it's been tested, that's just a plan. It's planned, but it's not proven. So the same way that we do we come back to fire drills. We all as companies have fire drills and we actually make sure the employees know where to meet. We have fire marshals, so we make sure that all the rooms are cleared of people. So we know that our personnel are safe and secure. And what are we doing about our integrity of our cyber side of things? Our network, how is that secured? Has the security of that been tested? You don't actually have a backup until it's been tested. So until you've tested your backup, it isn't a backup. It's just hope and praying. And if you think about it, when criminals nowadays are getting into systems, they are maybe in there for a good 4 to 5 to 6 months before they will then go and do something such as ransomware or encrypting your files. What do you think they're doing during that 4 or 5 months? They're looking at all of your backups. How do you get your backups? They could start degrading your backups. They could start making it look like you have backups when in fact they're empty shell files. There's lots of things there. So when was the last time you looked at your disaster recovery plan? What is your disaster recovery plan? How often do you implement it? How often do you talk to your IT guys and your tech guys and make sure that all the equipment is up to spec? When was the last time you shut your company down and started it again as though you're switching it off and switching it back on again? Have you ever done that? Can you do that? What would be the restrictions to the workforce if you did that? How long would it take you to get back on and running again? If one of your productivity machines went down, it could be that you have, a mechanical lathe and it runs on an old version of Windows and it has to because that's the only operating system it has. That is a vulnerability in your system. But is that linked to the rest of your network? Because as a cyber criminal, the first thing I'm going to look at is that standalone machine, although it's got network access, you don't think of it as part of the network. And yet it still has internet access so that things can actually be updated or upgraded on it. But because it's running an old version of Windows, it is now vulnerable because the patches are no longer there. The patches are brought about because vulnerabilities are found. You think of how many vulnerabilities there are on older versions of Windows that maybe some of your mechanical machines are now running, and they have to because whatever software you've now got won't run on the latest Windows. So therefore, where's your vulnerability there? Should that really still be on the network, or should that be on a separate network altogether? Should it be on a separate broadband system, not even on your network maybe? Why is that linked to your sales or your productivity? Are your sales and production separate networks? So if one of them goes down, the other one can still carry on. Or if you get a virus or you get ransomware and encryption, does everything go down? Because if you're in a production environment, you need to produce things, but you also need to be able to sell things. You need to be able to pay your suppliers. Your suppliers need to be able to know that you're valid and that you won't actually suddenly go under. So what preparations are you doing for that? So I think really what you need to start looking at is, for disaster recovery, what have you planned for, and do you really know what's out there? And you're going to need to speak to some industry experts in the cyber protection area to get that sort of information. The police are not cyber experts, if you like. I know it sounds silly coming from someone who's a detective constable who's within the cyber protect arena. I know what can go wrong, but there's so much out there that there is no way that I will know everything about everybody's system. And so therefore you need to get specific companies that are very, very clued up in that area, because they will know what is exactly going on in some of these systems, what the vulnerabilities on those systems are, where the failings on those systems have been in the past. How do criminals get into that type of system? If you look at your VoIP type stuff, have you got a proper telecoms company or someone who can look at your telecoms and say, here's your vulnerability. You've never changed the password from day one, and therefore you are now vulnerable to a weekend attack on VoIP because of the fact you've never changed your password. And someone could just phone in there, use the answer phone system on your VoIP, key in a few certain key codes that people know about, and they can now take over your system. Simple as that. Some of those are really, really simple, and yet they will still carry on doing that. And then sometimes people get multiple thousands of pounds worth of bills coming in for something like that when they haven't thought of that as even as part of their cybersecurity. So you need to get companies who know what they're talking about, look at things like Cyber Essentials, and guard against this area whereby criminals who are completely outside this country can take over your company and bring you down completely. So yeah, what is your disaster recovery plan? Do you have a plan? Has it been tested? How do you know that it's a good disaster recovery plan? Who have you run that past? Not just your IT department, but have you gone for an outside consultancy? Have you even looked at things like the National Cybersecurity Centre's website? Because there's an awful lot of stuff out there for businesses. And looking on the National Cybersecurity Centre's website will give you loads and loads of help for both personal and both business side of things. And another one is Get Safe Online, getsafeonline.org. They are really good for both personal and business advice, and they will have the most up-to-date advice in terms of what's going on, in terms of frauds and all sorts of things like that as well. But again, unless you're prepared, unless you've actually taken your company through a complete shutdown and a start-up again, you don't know if your disaster recovery works.